I am the one that drives the objectives and key results planning process each year. I drive it.
Yep.
And then we will assign a leader to each objective and then come together as a team to develop key results by which the objective will be measured on terms of whether it's a success. And so there's a way I have an organizing framework to have both me getting buy-in from my teams, but at the same time also I'm driving from the
Absolutely.
top.
Welcome to Entrepreneurism. I'm your host, Scott Pollack, a seasoned business leader, entrepreneur, and CEO coach with a passion for helping others achieve success in their entrepreneurial journeys. On this show, we dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, uncovering why so many struggle and revealing what the most successful do differently. True entrepreneurs have unique superpowers, including the ability to spot hidden business opportunities and convert them into thriving ventures. For most mere mortals, this ability is absolutely unfathomable. But these same strengths can become sources of struggle, whether it's pursuing multiple opportunities without losing focus, scaling without eroding culture, or balancing short-term demands with long-term vision. The entrepreneur's journey is full of tensions. Here we explore critical factors that drive entrepreneurial success: how to stay focused, manage resources, build strong teams, and develop the resilience to navigate the ups and downs of the journey. Bold ideas, candid conversations, and insights that will help you unlock your full potential. Ready to learn and grow, expand your toolkit, and discover actionable strategies to help you navigate your own entrepreneurism? Let's dive in. Really excited to welcome to the show another seasoned parallel entrepreneur. David Steele has built successful ventures across multiple verticals, but his ventures share a common purpose: helping the people around him grow and flourish. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me.
A little more background. David is founder and CEO of OneWealth Advisors, an independent registered investment advisor firm handling over $1 billion in assets. He's also a prolific restaurateur, having opened 7 restaurants over 16 years in California, and he's a yoga studio owner to boot. David, perhaps you can talk briefly about how you started your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, let's see. I started as a dishwasher in restaurants at age 16. As soon as was old enough to get a job, I got a job and I was a dishwasher, and then stayed in the kitchen for a while and saw the people in the front of the house happy, working less hours and making more money. So I moved to the front of the house, busboy, server. Eventually, when I was 24, I was finally a captain in a fancy restaurant wearing a suit every day in one of the better restaurants in Philadelphia where I grew up. And then I graduated college, and I didn't know that I could make money in the restaurant world because the chef owners that I worked for were amazing chefs, but they were not exactly crack business people. And so I didn't have great modeling for me. And so I started to work on Wall Street. I started a financial planning practice in 1991, built that practice up, as I like to say, one client at a time, the right way, and did nothing but that for 15 years, and had written the business plan for what became my first restaurant a couple of years before I ultimately opened it. And the first restaurant I opened was wildly successful, and I have since parlayed that into what is now a restaurant company with 300 employees and 7 restaurants and a consumer packaged goods business, and I'm founder and executive chairman of that. Spent about 30% of my time on that, about 70% of my time on the financial planning, investment advisory business, which I am founder and CEO of. Does that answer your question?
That goes a long way towards answering that question. So basically, a hustler who went out and just started doing it and then building it as you were doing it. I love that, and help me understand. You're building this financial advisory firm, which also has become reasonably sizable. I mean, it's not Morgan Stanley, but it sounds like you've got quite a few clients, and you're certainly not a solo practitioner doing all the work. So, you're building that at the same time. Now you're going out and starting to build restaurants and successful ones at that. How do you figure out your balance there and the focus?
Yeah, I mean, it was stumbling around a bit. I had to open a restaurant. I had to do it in this lifetime. If you recall, when I said I started as a dishwasher and I didn't have good examples of successful businesses, which had me be fearful of actually having that be my primary career, I did something that was a little bit more likely to succeed in a sustainable way with effort, which is, finance, financial planning.
Hmm.
Um, I, when I opened my first restaurant, it really was to scratch an itch just to see if I could do it. So you said parallel entrepreneur, which I haven't heard before, and I love that phrase, and I'll take that as a compliment. It was just me, almost like an artistic endeavor, having to see if I could do it. And so I hired a chef and a front of the house guy and made them partners in the restaurant. Of course, it's turned into a lot more since then. I didn't know what my role was. So I can only now, upon reflection, answer that question, which is my role in my financial planning company is twofold. One, I run the company as CEO. Really, what that means is I nurture my team members
Hmm.
and coach
Hmm.
them to help run the business of the business. And I'm an advisor, the company, and we have 400 clients who we're advising, and I'm
Hmm.
helping them articulate their goals. I'm helping the executive team for the financial planning company articulate the goals of the company and their own individual goals. And as it turns out, with the restaurant company, we have a 9-person executive team, and I see my role in that company as working with them to articulate our goals, quantify and develop strategy, and working with each of them individually to help them with their individual career goals. So I see my role, and it's a little bit strange to think about this way in both companies, as kind of doing the same thing, but it's only upon reflection did I sort of work my way into that, what I see as the same role in two companies.
That's interesting because from my perspective, that role is the head of the business, first of all. And it's a specific role. I mean, the title, it could be executive chairman, could be CEO, could be whatever. But that role of being the leader of leaders, as you were saying earlier, that you've got a number of leaders who are across your businesses, and you're coaching them to be as effective as they can be. You're owning the strategy, even though, of course, they're involved in it. It sounds like, and that's always a good practice. And you're the one who owns the culture. And those three accountabilities are, I think, the core of any head of a business, regardless of title. So that's interesting. I mean, but you sort of found that by just doing it, and it came naturally for you, which is great. What would you say, you know, if you abstract that a little bit, because now you're again connecting the dots going backwards. I love that Steve Jobs quote that you can only connect the dots looking backwards, right?
Right. Yeah.
But what would you say is your entrepreneurial superpower, and how have you leveraged that?
A moment ago you said I own strategy and I own culture. And I would say my superpowers is that I think, effective at having people feel agency and equity in their participation in creating strategy and culture.
Hmm.
It could be my nature. I don't know. I did Enneagram and Berkman and all that stuff. It all points to me never wanting credit for anything I do, but
Hmm.
always wanting to share credit. Like, that's my personality type. So I could be responding to that statement because I get triggered when I hear I and not we, because
Yes.
I'm very much a we person. But admittedly, if I feel an instinct about something strategic or cultural that I'm really confident is right, I'm going to work my tail off to get my team to buy into it so they feel like it's theirs. And at the end of the day, ultimately, the buck does stop with me for those things. So I'm trying to have it both ways, I think, in my response to you. But yeah, anyway.
No, by the way, I love that because when I say own, I'm really using it's accountability. It's where does the buck stop? And I'm a true believer that when there isn't someone accountable, or for that matter, when you hear, oh, well, we share accountability, that means no one's accountable. Any place in the business, frankly, and that can be, at the top or the bottom. It doesn't really matter where you say, well, we are accountable. That doesn't happen. Now, showing ownership, on the other hand, or feeling invested and empowered, that's a different story, and they can still go hand in hand. So I love that. I love the fact that
I completely agree with you, and I see them as complementary,
yep.
not oxymoronic, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, they're not. They go together. Certainly the best leadership teams are able to have individual accountability, for instance, across functions or across regions, whatever it is. But at the same time, those teams as a team are all driving the business. And
When
so
you do, can I ask you a question? When you do coaching, do you coach your entrepreneur clients in using any type of organizing methodology around organizing a company, say OKRs or KPIs or something like that? Is there any type of system you typically push entrepreneurs to use?
the answer is several. There are foundational systems, and certainly setting goals and priorities, regardless of whether you're using OKRs or you're using a different performance management framework, is core to execution. If people don't know where we're going, they're not going to get us there. If we're not measuring how effective they are in getting there, it's almost like playing sports without keeping score, right? I mean, that doesn't work.
Totally. Well, the reason I ask is I use OKRs
Hmm.
for my companies. And that is for me, it's a good example of what I think we're trying to talk about here. What we're dancing around is I am the one that drives the objectives and key results planning process each year. I drive it.
Yep.
And then we will assign a leader to each objective and then come together as a team to develop key results by which the objective will be measured on terms of whether it's a success. And so there's a way I have an organizing framework to have both me getting buy-in from my teams, but at the same time also I'm driving from the
Absolutely.
top. So to speak.
And that parallels what most of my clients are doing. So I've got a few clients where it's a little bit more bottom up in the development than that, but it's still, at the end of the day, the head of the business is the one accountable for making sure that we've got the right vision and the right strategy, and the rest of the team is taking accountability for delivering what falls within their functions. And actually, there's usually going to be cross-functional priorities as well, and it's really important that someone is accountable to drive it. Otherwise, you just end up with all kinds of finger pointing, and that's not healthy. It can be quite
Totally.
dysfunctional. So it sounds like you are definitely, one of your superpowers is getting people excited and empowering them, and they feel that they are owning the business that they're in, which is indeed a superpower, I think, and I can see how you're applying that. What would you say has been your greatest personal struggle? You really were sort of the organic entrepreneur. You launched the shingle and off you went. There was no raising big money, it sounds like, on the front end of your journey. But then you built it into something that obviously is kicking off economic benefit. But what were the biggest struggles along the way, or what was one big struggle you would say that you had to overcome?
Self-limiting beliefs.
Mm, that's a big one.
I'm a wrong side of the tracks guy. I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I grew up relatively poor, Jewish, divorced parents in a highly Catholic Italian American area where they might not have been happily married, but they stay married. And here was a nerdy Jewish kid who was poor, school teacher mom, and my motivation really was I didn't want to starve, but I always sort of had this chip on my shoulder, which probably kept me from embracing some of the modeling that was out there, mentorship, guidance. Yeah, I mean, I think my wrong side of the tracks made me turn away from seeking really top-notch guidance and leadership and mentorship because I think again, I had a chip on my shoulder. So, yeah.
How did you overcome that?
I don't know that I have. I think I suck. I think I suck less now at it. And, I'm not a very money motivated person. And so I don't want anybody listening thinking that what I'm talking about is, I'm worth X and I could be worth Y. That's not what I mean.
Hmm.
I just, I struggle with if if I open my aperture a bit to what is possible, would I make different decisions? And whenever I stop and meditate on that, the answer is often yes. So even still today, I'm pushing myself to try to get out of my comfort zone and ask why am I making these types of decisions, which in fact may not be optimized.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. I'm guessing that a lot of the listeners here can relate to a great extent. I mean, certainly one of the things that I've found in coaching CEOs is that we all still get imposter syndrome from time to time.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's related to that. It's absolutely related to that. Yeah, I have it every day, and it's I don't think it's the same thing
yeah, it's
that I'm
no, it
talking
didn't
about
sound like it was
here,
identical, but
but
it,
I think I do think they're related.
yeah, that's what it sounded like, and I do hear that. I mean, when people
I
are
mean,
willing.
I'll give you an example. Like in my financial planning company,
Hmm. Hmm.
I I I'd read something a long time ago about this concept called the econometrics U curve, which is at
Hmm.
some point in time you have more money and you become less happy. And I had a couple of experiences with very substantial net worth clients a very, very long time ago after having read that. And there was a personality mismatch. And so I had made this bombastic, ridiculous statement that, well, once somebody has north of X millions of dollars of net worth, I'm probably not interested in working with them because they're probably suffering from this econometrics U curve and they're inevitably going to be miserable or less happy or whatever. And they're going to be assholes. And the whole thing's ridiculous. And,
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
have that anymore. And we have clients that of the firm that way exceed what, that ridiculous philosophy that I was trying to
Hmm.
talk about. So that's just an example of one. That's a really ugly example, I think, but I think we all have, if we really think about it, what are we making up here? Really do maybe I didn't deserve to have at the time or felt like I didn't deserve to have extraordinarily wealthy clients. I wasn't qualified. Maybe that's what was actually going on with me.
Mm, okay. So self-limiting doubts. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's always times. So of course, in your journey, however, you've pushed through at least some of that in order to launch several different ventures. Tell me, what have you learned that has been applicable across these very different verticals from, from financial management to being a restaurateur to having yoga studios? What has been some common threads that you've picked up along the way?
People just want to be loved and valued.
Hmm.
And if you want to motivate people, make them feel loved and valued. If it's a customer of a restaurant, if it's a client of the financial planning firm, if it's a team member, a business partner, an employee, I don't give a shit. If you cannot make people feel loved and valued, you are going to be less successful than if you can make people feel loved and valued. And you can define success any way you choose to, whether it be acquiring more clients by referrals or having customers of a restaurant tell their friends how they felt loved and valued and
Hmm.
they weren't gonna use those words, but you know what I'm talking about. They're gonna come
Yeah,
back to
absolutely.
a general manager of a restaurant who stays 300% longer than the typical turnover in that role because they feel nurtured and cared for, and that's freaking universal.
Yeah. We all know what that feels like. And frankly, what it feels like when we don't get that. We go out to a restaurant and the food might be good, the service might be, efficient, but there's a big difference between that when you really feel like someone cared there. And I want to go
When
back
we
because of
hire
that.
Yeah, when we hire people at the restaurant, we're if anybody interviewing hears this, they're gonna know a little clue, but we're actually looking to see how often people smile.
Mm.
We're trying to feel what's in their heart. Is there a spirit of hospitality? Because you can say all the words, and this is sort of what I think you were just talking about
Hmm.
uh, when you were responding to me. You go into a place, and I don't, again, this applies to my financial planning company as well. I- If you interact with a human being who really at base doesn't actually want to help you and provide you hospitality, they can say all the right words and do all the right things. It still feels different. So there's a spirit to it that I think is really important.
Yeah, for sure. Hmm. So, what's one principle that's had the greatest impact on your growth as an entrepreneur? Is there something that again has pushed you to keep going?
Well, I I mean, you had said when you introduced me, really at the end of the day, I see myself as having a role in my business partners' lives in helping them articulate what their goals are for their lives professionally and frankly personally, financially, of course, and what do they want to do. That's where I'm at now. I think earlier it was I had itches. I wanted to open a restaurant. Of course, it succeeded, and we turned it into a company. I wanted to open a yoga studio. It succeeded. We turned into a multi yoga studio company. And these are creative itches that I felt I needed to scratch. But it quickly turned into me really wanting to work with my partners to help them find out what they wanted, to have us turn this into what we want to turn it into in each of the different businesses. I'm not sure that totally answers your question.
No, well, it does. I mean, there's no one answer I was looking for. I guess the way I think about that is that's sort of you as an entrepreneur having interest or even beyond that, curiosity to what you can do, and that leading to innovation that you've been able to, or growth in terms of building something that you've been able to drive. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurship comes from anyway. I mean, the number one place it comes from, I guess, is need. Many entrepreneurs, it started with just basic need. I had to do something, and I ended up becoming an entrepreneur because I had to put food on the table. But it sounds like
Well,
you
hopefully they identified a need in the marketplace too,
well, that
right?
too. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you're
that
right.
too. Obviously, they wouldn't have been able to put the food on the table unless they had something that there was a product market fit. In your case, going from your initial business, which was needs driven, both, I guess, both in terms of you needed to put food on the table, but also you were serving a need in financial services, to then branching out into areas where you had more interest than essentially that need, and having the drive to stick it out though. I mean, that's the part that I always find interesting, because there's lots of people who would, for instance, say, I'd love to open up a restaurant. I love food, or I love cooking or whatever it is, but they would never be able to build, you know, a successful group of restaurants because they would get stuck in what is naturally the ups and downs, or the big bumps that you run into when you're building a business. And you were able to push through that.
Well, to me, business is um is systematic behavior.
Hmm.
What did I do this minute, this hour, today, this week, this month? What's my system?
Hmm.
And if you keep your personal financial situation in check, that is to say, you never get over your skis and you are always spending less than you're making, no matter what that is. Um, you can be patient as an entrepreneur to allow systematic behavior to eventually win. You have faith that Sisyphus does, in fact, push the boulder up the hill, and it does, in fact, get to the top. And I'm a deep believer in what I just said, and I really would any of the listeners who are entrepreneurs and starting businesses, there is a framework, a system for you to go mimic that others have done. First of all, if it's a business, that's never existed before run. And yes, I would have bet against Meta and Google, and I would have bet against all of them because 99.99% of them fail. And the world doesn't write about those failures. It only writes about the successes. I'm a
Yes.
big fan of entrepreneurs generally looking into industries that have lots and lots of success stories. And you've got a model by which you can then go replicate and build a system and put your own flavor on it. And you can still be an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
So I'm a big fan of systematic disciplined behavior.
You're speaking my language. Systems and disciplines. Most of my clients, that's where we start. That's the core of what we're focused on is building those systems and disciplines.
So when I built my financial planning practice, the biggest gift I was ever given in business is I was cold calling and I would make 500 dials a day.
Mhm.
I'm not kidding. And I didn't go home until I made that 500th dial. And I had a sheet and I marked one, two, three. And then I would talk to 70 people. So the sheet had 100 of the second section. And then 10 people would be qualified.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
every day I would just go through the system. We have almost 1.3 billion in assets under management now. That started 34 years ago. I haven't picked up the phone in 15 years. We're by referral only. But for the first 16, 17, 18 years when we were doing marketing, if you will, that was our system.
Yeah.
So when I was fortunate enough to be able to hire somebody, it turned out it was my brother. I was able to have him dial the phone 500 times a day. And then eventually we were to have other people that, but of course, then I had to build my own systems for what I was doing and my brother and so forth. So the underlying premise is delegate to elevate, but each step along the way, you're having to build systems for the role.
Absolutely. And lots of grit. Also another common theme. Cool. I'd like to shift quickly. I always like to do some quick fire entrepreneur hacks questions. What's one book every entrepreneur should read?
How to win friends and influence people.
Classic. Absolutely. What's one
Everybody should,
thing
yeah, but how many people read it? And by the way, you could probably read it every year.
it's
And
so quick.
there's just it's
I've
so
read it at
quick,
least half a dozen times, and
and there's just
it's
so much
true.
magic in there.
Yeah, absolutely. What's one thing you do every morning to set yourself up for success?
Empty my inbox. I do it before I go to sleep. Also, I don't get out of bed until my inbox is empty, and I don't go to bed until my inbox is empty.
You are that guy.
I'm that guy.
Very disciplined. Zero inbox. Love it. What's a tool or app you can't live without?
My calendar. You are your calendar.
Mm, absolutely. More discipline. What daily habit keeps you grounded?
Exercise. And I just said you are your calendar. If you look at my calendar, you'll see 90 minutes to 2 hours a day dedicated towards exercise and stretching. It's a natural antidepressant.
And also, by the way, the discipline that implies as well is that you block time for yourself. And I
On it.
think that's super important. And what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
If you're not in the service of others in whatever you're doing, you're not going to be happy doing it.
Yeah. You remember who gave you that advice?
My mother.
Perfect. So, one last question. This has been terrific. What's one piece of advice you'd give to entrepreneurs just starting on their journey?
I gave it earlier, and I will emphasize this. I do some consulting, and before I agree to take on a consulting client as an entrepreneurial consulting client, I will ask this client about their financial situation. And what I'm looking for is somebody who is heavily indebted, that has a required monthly nut, they have dependents or whatever. And it's if you cannot figure out a way to tighten in the belt to have your expenses be really, really, really low as possible, you're going to be forced to do things in business that are counter to long-term success and sustainability. So my advice is always keep your expenses below as less than you make, quite simply. And if it's an entrepreneur endeavor where you're taking in outside capital, I mean, the investors do not want you taking a big salary. And so
Yeah,
just either way, keep your expenses low.
absolutely. keeping a hard eye on cash is such a critical one.
Well, it's interesting because I've never had a business hockey stick growth. It's not the kind of businesses I've started. I don't build things to sell them, right? And so venture capitalists are not necessarily going to be interested in the stuff I'm doing because they want that power law type of outcome, which is to say they actually want you burning cash. I'm a shitty spender. Right? So if you're going to hand me, $10 million in a round of capital, and my job is to go burn through that in 9 months to see if I can get that power law type of upside potential, the hair on the back of my neck stands up thinking about that. So it really does probably depend upon the type of business. So, buyer beware with my advice. I'm probably not advising an AI startup right now.
Yeah, but I'll tell you something. I've seen the full spectrum of those, and I've been involved in actually the full spectrum. And I still believe to this day, even the ones where you're in a race, that some of them have blown themselves up. I mean, we know that, right? You already said earlier that most fail, the vast majority fail, and so therefore, just spending for the sake of spending is not a great strategy as far as I've seen.
Well,
So
a lot of those companies, I think, made commitments to their source of capital where they promised certain hockey stick type growth. They may have woken up one day and go, "Uh-oh, this is not a hockey stick growth potential. There could be a brand here. There could be a service or a product here, but I better not blow through all this capital and have the board fire my ass
yeah,
because I refuse to blow through the rest of this capital, but it ain't going to work." So anyway, I've seen that with a lot of clients where they get funded by VCs and they know that they're not going to hit their growth numbers, and there's enough capital to pivot the company to something that's financially sustainable, but they don't do it. They still hemorrhage the cash and go to zero.
yeah, and that's a whole nother topic, right? The conflict of interest between VCs and founders, and it can be significant. It can be
Oh,
really,
yeah.
really significant. And unfortunately, most early founders who are in that VC game really don't know how to navigate it. I've seen plenty of very disenfranchised founders as a result. But then
It's
again, if
PTSD. It's
yeah,
PTSD. I
yeah,
mean, these failures are traumatic. It chips
yeah,
away at your sense of self-worth and your ego, and there's some radically s smart, potentially very successful people that went that direction, and they may never emotionally recover from it, and
yeah.
it's a shame.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Of course, I've also seen plenty of people that came out the other end after recovering from some of those nasty failures. But that's where they also learn how to play that game because it's hard to teach that. It's something that again comes with experience. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really enjoyed this conversation.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. You got a great show.
Thanks. And for my listeners, we've got many more amazing guests lined up. Please subscribe, leave feedback, and share this episode in your feeds. Till next time. Thanks for listening. Remember, entrepreneurship isn't just about spotting opportunities. It's about taking disciplined action to bring them to life. Hope you'll join again next time as we continue to unpack the complexities of entrepreneurism.